This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation.
We had an opportunity recently to discuss with Dot, one of our panelists in self-leadership, who is currently running a fall cohort on mindfulness-based stress reduction. And Adrienne and I were chatting after that interview, and we decided this conversation would put a nice bow on our recent panel discussions on self-leadership and wellness. So let's begin with an open-ended question, Adrienne, is how do you see the practice of mindfulness potentially fitting into all these leadership challenges we've been talking about recently?
You know what I hear time and time again, and this is, I mean, it's starting to stand the test of time, unfortunately, is that leaders are pressured to just keep going. And we are falling into this trap of do, get the task list done. I mean, these are things that our employees have been facing forever. And and I think leaders in prior years had maybe a little bit of a better ability. It was a little bit of a slower pace where we could kind of take that time out and really think, and we had strategic planning events and meetings, and we were able to do that. And now in recent years, we're doing so much. The world is moving so fast. More emails coming in, more texts coming in, more articles to read. We don't know where to go, where to prioritize. And I'm hearing this, and I know, Tom, you're hearing this over and over again. And I think the culmination of what we heard on our panel discussions, our series, was that we just are having a hard time with that pause that we talk about. And it comes back to what Dot talks about in her mindfulness work. And that is, we see this mindfulness as a muscle that needs to be worked. And I think we're letting it atrophy a little bit. And we need to get back to practicing it, or maybe for some of us, it's learning it for the first time. But I think that's, how it feeds in. It's step one. I mean, I'm starting to really see, like, hey, this mindfulness exercise and practice is step one to the big challenges we're seeing of, we just don't know how to prioritize, where to go, what to do next, and how to see that big picture.
Yeah, and for those that, for a reminder or for people that are new to a Leadership Beyond, we recently did a sprint of panel discussions, and two of the core discussions were around self-leadership and around well-being. And when we talked about well-being, we went from the individual to the team to the enterprise, all the way to societal impact. So that's just a little bit of context. And what we see now, of course, self-leadership, if the leader isn't healthy, then they're not going to be able to promote well-being in the enterprise. So what we saw is how interrelated all of that was. And from a business context, we see it in retention. What else do we see it in? Engagement,
Engagement, yeah. Just
productivity.
the performance of teams, right? That's a direct connection to the ability to effectively meet your goals.
And when you think in a mechanical world, human beings are more than mechanical, but in a mechanical world, the best way to increase your productivity in the plant is not to have maintenance downtime.
Hmm.
You will have your best month ever. And then the machines break down, and then you have your least profitable month ever. So,
And guess what? People break down, as
yeah,
we'll hear
yeah.
Dot talk about. Hmm.
And Dot used the term cliffing that her husband coined, because she said, my company would take as much as I could give, and I love my work, so I would give more than I could give. And then sooner or later, something would happen where her body said, if you don't slow down, you're going to be very sick. And I guess what we're encouraging is to put that in the equation sooner.
Yeah. Give it more focus.
Yeah. Don't
And
wait
that's not
until the
easy.
cliff. Don't wait to
And
the
we know
cliff.
it's not easy, right?
It's
So,
not easy, and we need to encourage each other to do that.
mhm.
So my question to you from that is, what happens with your clients and with you to help to remind you of that need before you get to the point?
Ugh, well, I mean, I'm not going to stand here and say I'm good at it because I don't feel like I am. It's a continuous practice. Um, and I know, I know we know what the right thing is to do. We know the fitness regimen that we should be doing. And still, when that alarm goes off at 4:45 a.m., do we want to get up? No, no. So, I think it's looking at your own internal motivators and understanding what is the thing that is going to get you to do the work. Um, and for me, it's keeping in mind that end game of taking care of my people, of being able to be present for my people. And in order to do that well, I know that I show up better when I have given myself some space. Um, and then you just have to stick to it.
And I would add to that something you said before we hit record. So we need to remember to hit record right away. We're working, that's a practice. But I want to bring it back to it is uh, when you do that reflection yourself, as a leader, you need to have a conversation with your people. And let's just say you don't have a budget to bring a dot Proux into the mix, or a positive delta or a diamond mine into the mix. What's one thing you can do to help your team be aware of the need for this? And you said it
Talk about
earlier.
it, model it,
Model it,
model it.
talk about it, and the word you used before, because this isn't a quiz, though it feels like it, is some sort of guidelines or guiding principle.
Mm,
Because
mm-hmm.
this is a quote
Right.
Adrienne conversation. Adrienne, you said during the pandemic, everybody is experiencing the same thing, pause, only differently.
Mhm.
And this is true around stress. Our thresholds are different. This is true around all of the things we've been talking about, engagement, well-being. It's not a one size fits all, but this impacts everybody. So everybody's experiencing VUCA, the thing you talked about, faster, accelerate, all of that is
Mhm.
universal.
Mhm.
Some are
Yeah,
thriving
it's
with,
having that anchor, right? It's having the easier thing to go back to remind you of what matters. And that guides you to making decisions. And that decision might be, let's stop.
yes, and the diamond mind uh, truth statement around that is have the conversation.
Mhm.
That
Yep.
can happen without additional resources other than making enough space for a conversation.
Yeah. So
Before you,
establish guiding principles, have the conversation, and make space.
that's powerful. There's a workshop in that, in the conversation. Yeah, so those are three simple things that any leader can do right where she is with what she has. And out of that conversation may come additional things. And sometimes we throw money at an issue and it doesn't work. We send everybody to mindfulness, and we're certainly not against that, but that may not be the most pressing thing.
It
Let's,
also, you might not be ready for it, perhaps, right?
timing could be off.
Dabble in it, but maybe you need a smaller step. And I think that's where Dot's program becomes powerful because she breaks it down. into
Yeah,
those small
yeah.
steps. So it's digestible, it's achievable. And you develop it over time, which is why she has it as a cohort. It's not a
And
one and done.
And that would be a good lead in to wrapping up this conversation, to let Dot tell us about her program. But something you said that's a good, you may not be ready for this. And Dot told the story in our first interview that when she was in the warrior mode of working before she transitioned to being an executive coach, she came across mindfulness. She wanted to be more present. She'd even done some reading on it, but she didn't establish a practice. And mindfulness is a practice. So there's somebody that might not be ready for that amount of time. Stay connected to mindfulness. There are little practices you can have, and dabbling isn't necessarily bad. It's a start.
Right.
You aren't going to have mindfulness be central until you devote enough space for it to be a practice. And isn't that true of any skill?
Sure is.
You can read a book and you can pass the quiz, but you sure can't do the thing without practice. I could probably read a book on scuba diving and sound like I'm an expert, but don't throw me in the water.
Yes, please don't.
Yeah, I won't. So, what were those 3 things that everybody can do right where they are with what they have?
Establish guiding principles, have a conversation, and make space.
I love it. And we hope you enjoy the conversation with Dot, and please stay connected.
Dot, thank you for joining us again. It's so nice to see you again.
Thank
Please,
you.
for our audience, share a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thanks, I will. I am currently an executive coach and leadership development advisor, and I also teach a course called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. Prior to that, I was a partner at a Big Four public accounting firm. I retired back in 2016 and started my coaching practice very shortly after that. And while I was in public accounting, I had a really stellar coach and some great leadership courses that got me interested about 10 years before I retired in what my next chapter would be. And so I am in my next chapter, living my next chapter now, and just really loved the team dynamics aspect of what I did, not so much the tax consulting aspects of what I did. It paid the bills. But the people dynamics and helping people sustain viable lives while they endeavored in the kind of career that we had chosen as individuals and we're doing together was really what drove me.
Well, hearing you talk about what you've done since you left the corporate world, what comes to mind is what were some of the stresses when you were the warrior woman doing all of that, and how did that perhaps lead to mindfulness?
Yeah, the stressors were definitely the very engaging work that I got to do. And if the occasion would arise, I would give my all to it if it was needed. And my firm would take as much as I would give. And so there were stresses that maybe felt unpleasant at times, high deadline orientation, production orientation, KPIs that were over the top, but that engaged me. And that was probably the bigger challenge, was my occasional preoccupation, but consistent high level of engagement with that opportunity to strive to excel. And so, if for me, living that life felt fun, but it was draining. And, the longer I did it, the more I recognized that it was hard for me to not keep doing it in my mind, even while I wasn't doing it with the rest of my body. Right. And so I would be at home and have a hard time not thinking about work, not relaxing. I would have a hard time focusing on things that weren't goal oriented. So I just really became interested and engaged in that striving, urgent lifestyle. It was fun for me. And at a certain point, like I said, it was hard to disengage from it, even when I wanted to disengage from it.
Oh, wow. I can so relate to that story. And I bet so many others can as well. That is, so many of us are driven by deadlines and the excitement and, fighting those fires and feeling good about that. And it becomes a question of how long can you sustain that? And I think you're right. Emotionally, you don't realize what it's doing to you. And maybe sometimes it's the physical pieces that start coming at you first before you recognize
Yeah.
that it's the thing that you actually enjoy doing that is slowly killing you. I mean,
That's
really.
exactly right. That's exactly right. I loved my firm, but there was no benevolent being behind the curtain at the firm that was going to tell me when enough was enough. I had to self-calibrate that, and that was a skill I had to learn. In terms of mindfulness and kind of what pulled me toward that, even as I was getting close to the end of my career in consulting, it had a lot to do with focus. So inability to relax, that was a little bit concerning, but I'm a high energy person, so I could deal with not relaxing. But I wanted to be able to be present for whatever I was with in that moment. And there was so much of a magnet coming from the work and what the firm was expecting me to do, feeling needed to do it, feeling engaged by it, being good at it. I wanted to be able to focus on other things. And it was hard. It was hard to switch my attention to what I wanted to pay attention to in that moment. So mindfulness started to become a little bit of a curious interest, and I would dabble in it. I would try maybe a little meditation. What is this meditation thing? And I would dip my toe into it and find it intensely unpleasant because I was not being productive. I was not doing while I was being mindful. And I found that a little intriguing, but without some formal infrastructure around how do I put my whole foot into mindfulness and then up to my knee and then both my legs, etc. I was just for a few years dipping my toe into it, not really getting any benefit from it.
Describe what you used a term called cliffing. Describe what that is, and then we'll talk more specifically about the mindfulness
Yeah,
based
yeah.
program.
Yeah, cliffing was a term that I think my husband came up for it in one of the episodes that we experienced together in my career, where I was very engaged in my work, very engaged in raising my family, really engaged in my life, and had a difficult time relaxing, shutting it down, that kind of thing, and really didn't recognize that I was going at such a pace that my body literally could not keep up with what I wanted to do. And so every few years, I would literally kind of fall off a cliff. And my body would tell me, you've done too much. Now you have a really bad virus, and you're going to get pneumonia after you get rid of the virus because your body is in really bad shape from constantly going and going and going. Or it would be a little minor surgery. Once I had to have one of my parathyroid glands removed, it just kind of fritzed out. These little things every few years would just pop up that made me go, stop. My body said, stop. Enough is enough. You're not recognizing it, so I will show you that now it's done. And we started calling it cliffing because it was literally, I would go and go and go until I got to the edge, and then I would fall off.
So tell us a little bit about how you took those experiences and those learnings and you turned that now into what you're doing today
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah, it's kind of has two paths to it, Adrienne. It's a really good question. One thing that I'm doing with it is I am continually reminding myself that as engaging as my work is now, I do not want to repeat history and set myself up for cliffing again. So I am more cautious about having more balance in my life, more cautious about what my body's telling me when I am accelerating at a really quick rate and when I feel that super engaged feeling. So that's one way that I'm kind of living what I learned. The other way is a lot of the people that I coach are in high performing, high paced, high drive, high goal orientation roles. And many people are experiencing the same thing. You said it resonated with you. If you are in a company or in a role or own a business, it will take as much of you as you will give. And so having been there, done that, I think as a coach and as a teacher of mindfulness, I can relate. It gives me a level of empathy and intuition about what their experience might be like so that I can ask the right questions, and draw the right thinking from them so that they can have a more sustainable life. That's the phrase that keeps coming to me. It helps. My experience is helping me have a more sustainable life now. And I think my experience is also helping other people have a more sustainable life.
Well, you mentioned the dabbler, and I want to confess, when I read about something interesting, I often say I should try that, as though you could just get a book and say, okay, I'll do mindfulness. And so tell us a little bit about the structure of your mindfulness-based stress reduction and how you get people to practice into the teaching.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's a really worthy challenge. And actually, one of the things, Tom, that I do is I ask them during the course to not read about mindfulness, because reading about mindfulness creates the sense that maybe you're practicing mindfulness, but you're not. You're reading. And it creates for a lot of people a pleasant feeling to read about mindfulness. And the point of the course that I teach is not to create a pleasant experience for you while you practice every time. Lots of people will experience a pleasant feeling during mindfulness practice, but not all the time. So the structure of the course is to introduce people to what is it we're talking about when we say let's practice mindfulness. And it means let's practice focusing our attention on something specific and paying attention to that thing, whether it's your breath or a body sensation or what have you. There's lots of different things we focus our attention on in formal mindfulness practice. And when we notice that our attention has drifted, the practice is to bring your focus back to the intended anchor for your attention over and over and over again. And in doing that, you are literally training your brain to support your ability to pay attention to what you intend. It's a transferable skill in many situations. And the exercise of it, the practice of it, informal practice, I analogize it frequently to going to the gym. It is like working on a muscle. And the more you do it, the more capable you are of deciding in every moment of your life, hey, I want to pay attention to this right now. You get better and better at it. And the structure of the course is such that you're with a cohort. And when you're trying to develop a habit, which is challenging, we all know that it's challenging to start a habit. It's even more challenging to start a habit if the habit that you are engaging in doesn't create immediate satisfaction and pleasant experience. So the presence of a cohort is so valuable. You've got accountability for not just yourself, but coming to class each week and people expecting to be able to talk with you about your experience and share their experience with you. And you feel a sense of accountability to be ready and prepared to do that. And if you don't practice throughout the week during the class, which is an expectation, you are letting other people down and not just yourself. And that's a big part of habit building is external accountability. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
And we're going to include some information on research about the effect on the brain of this practice. But anecdotally, what are some of the benefits that you've noticed for yourself and those who have journeyed with you?
Yeah, it's a really, really relevant question today. I was walking this morning with a friend of mine at State Park, and we were talking about mindfulness, and I was telling her that I'm reading a book right now about the effects of mindfulness. And I saw a chart recently that talked about if you engage in formal mindfulness practice for 15 minutes, you will notice immediately after that practice a little better ability to focus. So I've told my clients, if you've got a test coming up, if you've got a meeting that you've got to be very attentive to, just do a quick mindfulness of breath meditation before you go in. So just a few minutes will help you focus. Go into 2 weeks, and the benefits extend to beginning to notice more about your surroundings, just being more present from moment to moment. And then the chart walked through, different stages. 8 weeks of a mindfulness class, people start to notice that, hey, I actually am recognizing from moment to moment how the person with me is responding to me. It's creating an ability in me to go, if they're responding like this, maybe I'll make a different choice about what I say next. So it starts to have an impact on relationships, choice making. It starts to have an impact on noticing what you consume. There's an element of paying more attention to what you eat, how you eat, when you eat, what you watch, what you read, what you listen to, and how it's impacting you. It increases the sensitivity of your body to stressors that you invite into your life. Suddenly you notice when you're doom scrolling, my chest is tight. Maybe this isn't so good for me. Maybe there's some incentive there to make a different choice in how I spend my time. Really optimistically is this notion that after 1,000 hours of practice, people start to notice a general increase in their overall sense of well-being, just holistically. It caused me to want to do some math to go, where am I at? How many hours have I done? But what I was telling my friend this morning is I am starting to notice. I am starting to notice that it's less effortful for me to cultivate the perspective that I want to hold from moment to moment. It's less effortful for me to see something from multiple angles than it used to be, and to recognize that my perspective is my perspective and that I have some control over that. So I am starting to notice 4 years into practicing pretty regularly, kind of this holistic impact on how I relate to my emotions, to my experience, to the people in my life. So I'm living it, and it is a real sense of accomplishment, because that's how I roll. But it's also a sense of peace. It's a sense of peace. Yeah. Not constant, but I'm noticing it.
Well, there's no shortcut, right? There's no easy
No
button.
shortcut.
There's no pill that you
No.
can take.
No.
And it takes time, and it takes commitment and continued practice. And
Yeah.
it sounds like all of that is so worthwhile.
Oh, it is. It is worthwhile. Like all good things, right? Nothing comes without work, and without sacrifice, because it is a sacrifice to spend that time doing it, but it's worth it. Yeah.
Well, the benefits are clear, and participants have an opportunity to begin the practice with you this fall.
Yes, for sure, Tom. And actually, I have a cohort starting of mindfulness-based stress reduction with an orientation class on Tuesday, October 1st. Pretty much every class that I offer that is along these lines of these 8-week online, I start at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. We do end up having people almost in every cohort from across the United States, and occasionally from Australia, interestingly enough. But Orientation is October 1st, and then a couple weeks after that, class 1 is Tuesday, October 15th. The last class in the 8-week framework is on Tuesday, December 3rd. And fall is a really popular time for people to take the course because things are starting to wind down. What would you call it? Meteorologically. So things are slowing down in terms of the weather, but they're speeding up with the holidays. But there's this feeling of great change in the fall. So it's a really popular time for people to pause and reflect. I do want to mention this particular cohort too. We have this really cool opportunity with the University of California at Davis. Cliff Saren's lab, Saren Laboratory, studies mindfulness in the brain. And anybody who takes mindfulness-based stress reduction in my cohort this fall has an opportunity to participate in an independent study with Saren Laboratories. They're actually looking at what is the impact of contemplative training. So trainings like mindfulness, taking a class like mindfulness, what's the impact on your well-being? And so anybody who feels like, hey, that'd be kind of cool to participate in kind of the greater good, I'd be studied a little bit for the impact, would have an opportunity to do that, which I think is kind of neat.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us about mindfulness-based stress reduction. And we look forward to every conversation with you.
Thank you both.
It was great. Thanks for bringing it to the world.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.